Okay, so the Hemopro is probably the most common one, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on it because most people know what it is, or they're at least, they've used it before. But for those of you that haven't, maybe you're a Terumo user or a brand new grad that works somewhere with Venapaks and now you're going somewhere else and people have never heard of anything but the Hemopro. So let's get into that. So here we go here. So I've got my BTT port already in place. I've got the small seal because I'm dissecting. And remember, the Hemopro is the smallest angle or the sharpest conical tip, so it slides through the tissue pretty darn easily. So, with the McKay scope, you've created kind of a little pocket to put that port in, the BTT port. Sometimes people don't, and they just have slid it over the scope and they kind of dive in, and then once they find the vein, then they slide it in. That's fine too. So either way is good. So, kind of create a little bit of space here around. I have a strange branch that's actually a branch going down kind of medially in the leg. This is the actual saphenous, the ongoing saphenous down the leg. So like I said, I like to do posterior first because it allows, a little space for that vein to fall down. It makes the anterior pass a little bit easier. So with this sharp tip, it slides through there pretty darn easy. If I could give myself a critique with this harvest, I could do a better job at not just staying in the 6 o'clock plane. So, if this is our clock, you've got 12 up here. Wow. Strike that. 12 up here and 6 o'clock down here. What I need to do is probably kind of aim here and here, kind of sweep back and forth as I go through. Rather than just stay at the 6 o'clock point. But it's fine. I mean, it works. It works just fine. But if I were to give myself a critique, that's what it would be, is to kind of go back and forth. Sometimes, I don't know if you can appreciate this, but on this video here, there's some connective tissue right here. And I think that the Hemopro tip, the conical tip, is so sharp it can actually kind of scalp the vein if you're not careful. So I think what's happening here is I've kind of gotten almost too close to the vein, and it's created this almost like adventitia. I don't know that it's actually adventitia. I think it's connective tissue. Pulling the adventitia off would be pretty hard, I would think, I would hope. But if I go back here a little ways, you can kind of see it building up. Maybe it is adventitia, honestly. I mean, as I watch it, my scope is a little too up this way. I probably need to stay down here and leave just a little tiny bit of tissue in between there so that this doesn't happen. So I think it's great because that sharp tip can fit through tight spaces, but it can also be a little too sharp and sometimes scalp the vein a little bit, which I imagine impacts the, quality of it. So I'm making my way through and staying in the right plane, which is good. There's not too much fat between me and, there's starting to be, of course, right as I say that. Not too much fat between me and the vein. So once I finish that posterior pass, I can come back. Now look, I don't feel that I had any avulsions or that I was too rough with the tissue. I kind of just stayed at 6 o'clock. But look, the tunnel has some bleeding in it. So those little tiny crossing vessels and things and the stuff in the walls and obviously the branches of the vein can bleed. So that is a vote in favor of the Venapaks because you could just, if you saw that as I'm coming back, I could just kind of spot cauterize that as I go. So this is an important point with the Hemopro. As you come back to do your next pass, whatever it might be, you always want to visualize the BTT port. Too often I see harvesters that have gone and, they're at the distal end of their tunnel and they come back and they think they're at the knee or they think they're at their incision and they start doing their anterior pass, but really there's kind of a section of tissue that they didn't withdraw far enough back. And that can be difficult, once it's time to remove the vein. So always make sure you see that port when you come back. So now I'll kind of pop some little windows through the side. I discover a little branch here, so I got to be careful of that. And then once I have some windows in there, I can start my anterior pass. It's up to you if you take these lateral branches now, if you dissect them out, or if you wait until you do your right and left pass. It doesn't really hurt as long as you do it the same way so you don't miss anything. It should be fine. But that conical tip does a nice job because it's so sharp. It can fit through tissue pretty nicely. So here I'm using my outside hand. So I'm pushing on the tunnel and I'm pushing the tip of my scope into my fingertips. And with that sharp tip, you can really make, some little windows through fascia without disrupting a lot of tissue. So I'll just kind of pop a little window above and below that branch. And if there's a lot of connective tissue or fat in the way, you can make a couple more windows. But really, I just need one. I don't want it to be tethered in the wall when I go to cauterize it. I want it to be freed up. So, and then I really need to get back on top. I'm kind of staying to the left, but all right. So I kind of get those freed up a little bit there. Keep working up my tunnel. Find another set of branches. Pop some windows. Kind of typical dissection stuff, but you do have to be very careful with that sharp tip. One time, I think, I thought I was dissecting a branch, and I thought I was above or below it. I can't remember which, and I went right into it, and it was sharp enough that it tore a hole in it, which was uncomfortable. So I just did a stab and grab and tied it off right then, and it was fine. So once I'm at the distal end of my tunnel for my anterior pass, I'm going to pop some windows. I kind of clean off the right side as I come back. Now you'll see I still do a right-sided pass, so maybe it's a waste. I don't know. It's just habit. So I just kind of pop some windows. Sometimes I get distracted and I go to the left like this, but just making sure I've got enough space that I can protect my vein while I cauterize my branches. So this is my formal right-sided pass. I'm working my way up the right side, cleaning up any of this tissue. Now, I will say some of this kind of thin connective tissue is super easy for the Hemopro cautery to take. It's not difficult to divide that, whereas the Terumoscope sometimes, especially if there's a branch and then some connective tissue, it's kind of hard to get through that wispy tissue. So when I'm done with that phase, then we'll take the conical tip off. Here's a trick for what it's worth is a lot of people will rub the sponge of the Fred kind of up against the end of their scope. That works, and it works fine. But if you drip it over the end with the actual bottle of the Fred while you're hooking everything else up, the heat from the scope can kind of like dry that Fred on the end of your scope. And because it's a drop, there's a lot more of it. And it almost acts as like it's just a little bit more effective. So it applies more Fred and keeps it there longer. So just a little tip I've picked up along the way. So I believe you can see the other PA I was covering at a different hospital when I took this, and she's looking at me, she said, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "Well, this is why."